How do I develop a culture where our congregation and staff feel it is safe to make messes? Honor effort. Don't punish failure.
John Maxwell made a statement that I read many years ago that I think really helped me. He said, the way you deal with the worst determines if you ever get the best. And so I think that when somebody fails, everybody's watching to see how you deal with them. For instance, somebody gives a bad prophetic word. We're not talking about false prophet or something. Somebody just gets up and gives a bad prophetic word. First of all, if we develop a prophetic culture, pretty much everyone in the room knows that was a bad prophetic word. Now they want to know what the fathers are going to do with someone who just failed. So Bill's really, really excellent at this. He'll take something that, he just looks for the good in things that happen. And he'll pick out the one thing that, like, okay, that was good. I agree with that. And he'll acknowledge that. That was really good. Everybody else knows, like, he didn't agree with the other 9 points. But the point is that if you want to develop a culture where people actually create, innovate, move in signs and wonders, then we need an R&D department and we need a manufacturing department. In the business world, let's say your iPhone. How many of you know that in the manufacturing department, their core value is 0 defect? So they want every single phone to work every single time. But if you applied that core value to the research and development department, you wouldn't have anything. So we need to make sure that the manufacturing department is character. We look for 0 defect in character. That doesn't mean we punish people when they don't measure up, but we don't want people like practicing lying. It's like, no, that's not a good plan. And we want people to be integrous all the time. But if we want them to move in signs and wonders and miracles, we're going to need an R&D department. And people are not going to get it right every time. And so I think one of the things I think is really important, I try to do this in training prophetic people. I don't try to do this. I actually do this. When I start training prophetic people, the first few weeks, the testimonies I share are most often about my failures. And we laugh about them, and I tell funny stories about thinking I had the word of the Lord, and it didn't go right, and I've got 50 of those stories where people just and it's funny because you get people laughing at themselves, and they're like, well, if he can screw up, I guess I can too. I mean, he's leading the class. And I think it's really important for people. I think it's important for us to be transparent. And I'm using prophetic as an example, but in every area, our people need to hear that we have failed. And I'm not talking about morally. They need to hear, we prayed for that person, they didn't get healed. Bill shared a testimony, I think it was here or Sunday, that he prayed for 6 or 7 people that had MS in a conference, or 5. 5 and 2 nights, and none of them got healed. I think that was just as releasing for people as hearing about the person who got healed from MS. Because people were like, well, you know what? If he can pray for people and they don't get healed, and he continues to have faith for people, I can do that too. But if you stand up here and you're like a superstar, like everybody you pray for gets healed, every prophecy you give is right, every demon you try to cast out gets cast out, people are like, I can't do that. I can't. I'll never be like that. And so I think that we develop a culture of transparency. We develop a culture where we do discipline people, but we don't punish them. And we develop a culture where we celebrate small victories. And Bill has taught us this really well the last couple of years. We concentrate on what God has done and not what God has not done. And so we talk about that all the time. And then, when somebody makes a mess, we tell them, how are you going to clean up your mess? So if somebody, I'll use prophecy as an example. If someone gives a bad prophecy, privately, if they're in relationship with us, I'll say, so what do you think about that prophecy? And we'll talk through it and say, so what do you think you need to do to clean that up? Because it's really important for people to play the game with a coach. I grew up playing basketball only on pickup teams. I've never been on a team where I was coached. When I go and play on the court with other guys, they can tell. They can tell that I've never been anywhere where there was a ref who called fouls or a coach who taught me plays. There's a huge difference because I've never been coached. We want people to come into a culture where they're coached. And people know they're going to be coached. So when somebody does something, like whether they're writing a book, somebody comes to me, we've had lots of people writing books, they go, how do you like my transcript? This is good, this is not good. I wouldn't put that in there. And it's like, if they're going to go, their heart's going to be broken, I'm like, well, don't ask me if you don't really want to know. But the goal is to create a culture where people realize being coached is normal. When someone gives you feedback on how you're affecting their culture, that's called normal. It's not called like, oh my God, Kris had a negative opinion about a piece of what I did. It's like, no, that's called coaching. That's called life. And get used to it because this is what we're supposed to do as fathers. Give you feedback on how you're affecting our culture. And trust that you did it with the right heart. Even if you did the wrong thing, you did it with the right heart. So that's my input.
When I taught my boys to ride their bikes, I took them to the park where there was a lot of grass so that when they fell down, they would fall safely. And I like to steelhead fish. I don't get to do it much anymore, but I do enjoy it. And in Weaverville, we were by the Trinity River. And the old-timers, if you talk to them about catching steelhead, they'll tell you, if you don't get your tackle, your bait, your weights, whatever it is that you're using, if you don't get it snagged on the bottom of the river now and then, you're not fishing deep enough. And there's a realm we're trying to enter into that automatically accounts for getting tackle snagged on the bottom of the river. It's not going to always work. I've been telling our folks lately, listen, if you're praying for people and they're not getting healed, congratulations, you're pushing the envelope. So we've got to applaud. Kris does an amazing job. He'll take like a room like this, he'll pair you off, and he'll say, all right, everybody on the right, give a word of knowledge. In other words, something you couldn't know in the natural about the person you're faced off with. At the end, we'll ask the question, how many of you got it right? They raise their hand, everybody claps. He says, how many of you got it wrong? They raise their hands, everybody claps. We're not talking about moral failure. We're talking about, as leaders, we have to create an environment where risk is applauded, knowing that eventually there will be breakthrough. As long as you stay accountable, as long as the culture of honor works if you have a culture that confronts.
That that last comment Bill made is in the back of my sheet. I just wanted to say this, that we need to make sure that we confront, we develop a culture of confrontation. Just to make sure, I was raised in a home where confrontation meant yelling, screaming, hollering, just to make sure the definition is the same. I'm not talking about that. I'm simply talking about asking people why they did what they did when they do something that negatively affects the culture. That's what I'm talking about. Honorably talking to them about why they're behaving like that. Sometimes they have really good reasons for doing really bad things. People can have a really good heart and be doing the wrong thing. And we're like, okay, I'm glad. I love your reason. Change your action. And then sometimes people just have the wrong heart. And it's like, deal with your bitterness there. That's not a good plan. That's going to kill you. And so they need people, and not just people, we need really good feedback about how we're affecting our culture, because we don't always know how we're being perceived, and how what we're trying to do is not what we're accomplishing sometimes.